Welcome back, everyone. Dan Vega here, and today we're going to be talking about the web client in Spring Framework. Now, I recently did a video on all the clients in Spring, whether it was the REST template, the web client, the REST client, or HTTP interfaces, and I got a lot of questions out of that. I got some good questions before that as well, and some of them revolved around the web client. One of those questions I'm going to answer today, and that was from a subscriber over on YouTube. It says, could you provide a video covering asynchronous requests using the web client or another library that can offer this? And if possible, how to do unit tests as well, as that would be very helpful. So this is a great question, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun answering it. Yes, when it comes to unit testing the web client, there are some things we need to think of, and we'll walk through that in this video today. So what we're going to do is we need a REST API to call. We need a web client is going to call out to a service. We could stand one up, but that'll take longer and make this video a little bit longer. So I want to cut straight to the point. So here I am over on JSON placeholder service, and this will give us some fake, free, and reliable APIs for testing and prototyping. So if we go down here, there is a way to use it. There's a bunch of different endpoints that we can go ahead and hit. If you've been on this channel, you know I love using this service. So we're going to use the posts endpoint. So we'll want to model a type in our system after this. The post has a user ID, an ID, a title, and a body. That way, when we reach out and we want to get those posts back, we can assign them to a type in our application. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to head over to start.spring.io. We're going to create a new project using Java and Maven, the latest version of Spring Boot. We'll go ahead and say our group is dev.danvega. We'll call this async. These all look good. We're using Java 22. You can use whatever you feel like using. And then I'll go ahead and add a dependency. The only dependency that we need is Spring Reactive Web. When we bring in the web starter, we get all the things that are around Spring MVC and imperative style programming, right? So we get things like the REST template and the REST client. When we bring in the reactive web starter, we get everything around kind of reactive web applications with Spring Webflux and Netty. So this will bring in the web client for us, so we'll be able to use that in our applications. That's all we need. You can go ahead and click generate. This will download a zip file. You can go ahead and open up this application in whatever text editor or IDE you're most productive in. I'm going to open it up in IntelliJ Ultimate Edition because I really like it. And that's what we're going to use today. So with that, friends, let's go ahead and write some code. All right, so I have my application open up, and we are going to get going here by creating a new record. So we're going to create a record in Java, and we'll put this under the post package, and we will call this post. Again, this is going to be a record. And so we have this post record, and we're basically aligning this up with what that JSON placeholder service returns. And it returns an object with a user ID, a ID, a title, and a body. So that will be a record. Those are the four components of the record. With that, we can go ahead and create a post client. So I'm going to say new Java class. We'll call this a post client. And this will be a component. So what we need now is we need that web client. So I'm going to say private final web clients. Again, that comes in through the Spring Boot reactive starter. We picked that from the Spring initializer. So we get that Spring Boot starter Webflux, and that gives us all we need, including a web client. So let's say public post client, and then what we'll say is web client. And I want to talk about something here because normally in the past I would have done something like this. So builder, and then we can go ahead and say this web client is equal to builder. Yes, something like that, right? And actually we can stick with this for now. I'm going to keep this for now, and then I'll point out a problem with this approach later on when we get into testing. So now we need to go ahead and create some methods. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we are going to return a flux of posts, And we'll call this find all. And we can use the web client to say get. So we're just calling a get operation. The URI is going to be /posts. The method that we're going to use is called retrieve. And then what we want to do is we want to turn the body into a flux. And we're going to use that post record that we just created. So that is probably enough to get us a list of posts. I want to test this out now. I'm using air quotes here. You can't see me, but I'm using air quotes. I want to test this out just to make sure this works, and then we'll get into our test. Normally, I would write actual tests for this, and we are going to do so, but I just want to kind of explain something before we move a little bit forward. For anyone not used to writing kind of reactive applications, let's talk about what we're going to do here. So I'm going to create a command line runner. So command line runner, and this is a command line runner. I'm going to get an instance of that post client. We'll just call that client. And here I'm going to return args. And what I want to do here is just see if that call happens. So what I want to do is say post client.findAll.var. And we get a list of posts. So what we cannot do now is, yeah, that's fine. What we cannot do now is just say, go ahead and print these all out, right? That should work, right? So if we did this, we're actually not going to see anything printed out to the console, because what we are doing with this is we are using the reactive web client. So we may not immediately get something back. So we have to actually subscribe to those posts. And then when those results come back, then we can actually do something with them. So what I can say is post.subscribe. So what I need to do here is I could subscribe to it. You can also take in things like a consumer, a subscriber, a core subscriber, all these different overloaded methods for subscribe. One thing I can do is actually just say system.out.print line. So I'm basically just printing all of those to the console now, but we're doing that when we subscribe to that. So now what I should do is go ahead and run the application. If everything works out, we will go ahead and get a list of posts from our JSON placeholder service and subscribe to that, and then go ahead and print those out to the console. All right, and there are our 100 posts that were printed out to the console. So far, so good. I'm going to just, so we can keep this a little bit shorter, I'm going to paste in a few methods in here just so you can kind of see what a complete client looks like. So if we go back to our post client, we have the ability to find by ID. Again, we're using the web client. It's a get call. The URI is a little bit different. In this case, we're only returning one, which is a mono. So we turn that body into a mono. Again, the type that we're interested in is the post record that we created. There's a way to create one, there's a way to update one, and there's a way to delete one. So that gives us all of that. Now we can begin to write some tests for this. And I want to focus in on the first one that I was asked about, which was like, hey, how do I write a unit test for this? So let's start there with generating a new test. So we'll create a test. We'll call this the post client test, and we'll go ahead and create that. I need to do one thing here because I'm not bringing in Spring using like the @Spring Boot test annotation. I'm going to extend with, and I'm going to bring in Makito for this because we're going to need to mock things out. If we're writing a true unit test, we want to make sure that we are not actually making a call out to a third-party service. That is something we will mock out in a unit test. But we'll write another test later where we actually do an integration test to call the actual service. So the first thing I want to do is I want to mock out the web client. So I may say mock web client. That's good. Now, and actually let's come back to that in a second. I will need an instance of the post client. So post client, we'll say post client. And to get that, let's set up a before for each. And we'll call this setup. And then what I'll do here is just say this post client is equal to new post client. And what it takes in is something. All right, so as I said, we get an instance of the web client through this builder interface. And Spring will create an instance of this and wire this in for us. So then we just set our web client equal to that builder. We set the base URL. We build that, which returns a web client. This works out great until you get into testing, right? Like one of the things I love about testing is it always points out some flaws or some things in my code that I can improve a little bit more. Because how am I going to create an instance of the builder? There is no instance of the builder. And there's a default web client builder, I believe, that is the class. But what might be a better solution here is to create an instance of the web client and pass that in here so that when we go out to mock this out, we can just mock out the web client, which we've already done here. So we could just pass this in, right? So that's not going to work right now, but we can fix that. First off, let's just say that we get a web client. We'll call this client. And we'll say, and actually, let's just call it web client. And then we'll say this.web client is equal to web client. Now, right now, there is no instance. We can't auto-wire this in because we don't have a web client. So we need to create one. So in my application class, this is a configuration class. So I can go ahead and create beans in here. So I'm going to create a bean. I'm going to say that this is the web client, web client. We will take in the web client builder here. We'll call this builder. And now we can return builder.baseURL because this is the only web client that we're going to be using in this application. If there were multiple clients for multiple services, we could go ahead and do this a little different, but this is okay for this. And we'll go ahead and build this. So now I have an instance of a web client that will get auto-wired into here. And we are good to go here. And now that allows us to, in our post client test, we can now pass that in because this is taking the type web client as an argument. So now that we have that, let's talk a little bit about testing this, right? So I might have a test down here. Now we're not done yet, but I want to kind of point this out. We might have a test and we might say test find all posts. Right? So I'm going to create a couple posts. Let's say hello is equal to new post. And this will take in a user ID, a title. So let's call this hello world. And this is my first post. And then let's say goodbye equals new post. 1, 2. This is, let's say goodbye. This is my last post. I didn't realize this, but it was kind of dark to have a goodbye post, but we get the idea, right? Let's fix that. What did we miss here? Oh, whoa, that's wrong. Okay, so now that we have two posts, we need to mock some things out. Now, the problem with this mocking this out is we've mocked out the web client, but the web client has this Fluent API, right? So if we look at this, the web client has this get call. So there's a get method. Then it has a URI call. Then it has a retrieve call. Then it has a body to flux call, right? There's all these, because of this nice Fluent API, which is great on the front end, right? It makes it really easy to read. It's really easy to write this code. It's a little bit harder to test this code because all of those things have to be mocked out. So we have to say, let's use Makito here. So Makito.when, can we import static? Yes. So when the web client.get call is made, then what we want to return is something called a request header URI spec. So we're going to have to mock those out. So I'm going to pull in a couple mocks because we're going to use these, but actually we'll just start with this one. So I want to go ahead and mock out the request header URI spec, and then I can go ahead and copy this in, and this is what we'll run and return there. Okay, then now again, part of that Fluent API is whatever we return from one thing, then that thing is now responsible for returning something else. So when the request header URI spec .uri call is made, and we'll even say to /posts, then what I want to return is a request header spec. So I'll say, let's go ahead and pull this in. So we'll say mock private web client request headers spec. There it is, request header spec. And then that is what I want to return here, right? Okay, and as you see, this is what starts to happen. We need to basically mock out everything. So I'm going to throw a couple more lines in here and one more spec, which is the response spec. And as we make that simple call to that find all, we need to go ahead and mock all these out. So we're mocking get URI, retrieve, body to flux, so that we have something to return. So now when we go ahead and make that call, we can use the post client. We can say find all, and that is the result. Now we can use the step verifier to basically create this. Let's pass in our result, and we can check some things on this. We can say expect the next one to be hello. We can do this one more time to expect the next to be goodbye, and then we can verify this is complete. All right, I'll disable that inspection for now. So now that we've kind of mocked all of these things out, now we can go ahead and hopefully test this. So let's see if this passes. And it indeed does. So this is okay. So in the README, we started with this writing test against the post client. This post client test, this is a true unit test, but given the nature of the web client's Fluent API, this can become a little bit tricky to mock out. That's what we just saw, right? I want to thank my friend Philip Ricks, who has a really great, wonderful testing resource on his website that I've linked to. And as he points out, a better approach to this is to start a local HTTP server and just mock the HTTP responses from the remote system instead of trying to mock all of these different calls throughout that Fluent API. So that is exactly what we're going to do in our next test. And to do so, I think the first thing that we're going to need is, and one of the suggestions that Philip made for an HTTP mocking server is com.squareup.ok/http3. This gives us a mock web server. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh that. And let's go back to our testing folder here. And inside of post, we're going to create a new one, and this is going to be called our post client mock web server test. So this is our post client. Oh, it looks like let's just refactor that a little. Yes. Okay, so let's talk through this one. So the first thing we're going to need is a mock web server. So we got that from that library we just pulled in. The next thing I'm going to need is a post client. So I'll call that post client. The final thing that I'll need is a object mapper. And this comes in through Spring just transitively by pulling in that reactive starter that we did. And so we'll get an object mapper. We'll call this the object mapper. Oh, actually, we are not going to use Spring Boot here at Spring Boot test. So I'm not going to get one auto-wired in for me. So I'll just create an instance of one here. So before all, we are going to static void setup. We are going to mock web server, mock web, this dot mock web server is equal to new mock web server, and mock web server, sorry, this dot mock web server dot start, right? So that should work. Why didn't I do this? That would help, right? All right. So this will throw an exception, right? Okay, so before we're going to start it up, after our tests, we are going to tear it down. And we're just going to say mock web server dot shutdown. So now our mock web server is either started up or shut down after our tests. Okay, let's go ahead and initialize something. So I have a before each. And what we'll do in here is we'll set the, let's go ahead and say string base URL is equal to string.format. We're going to use HTTP localhost and then %s. And the way that we'll get to the host is from the mock web server dot get the port. So now we have the port. Now we can go ahead and create our post client. So post client is equal to new post client. Again, that takes in a web client. So we're going to say web client dot builder, and we'll set the base URL here. So web client builder, builder dot base URL, which is going to be that base URL we just created, and we can build from that. Again, because we are now taking in a web client, we can use that builder method to create one and go ahead and pass that in. I still like the idea of just using a web client on the post client. For our main unit test that we just wrote, we can just pass in that mocked web client. So now we can get to the test, right? So at test, let's say void test find all posts, right? And here's where we can do some things. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and just copy those two posts that we created before. And I want to get the JSON response. So this is a JSON response. We can get this from the object mapper using that right value as string. And then we pass in the value, which is a new post array. And that is going to be hello. Oops, got my brackets messed up. All right, so this will add an exception for that. So we have our two posts, our JSON, which is basically what it's going to look like coming back from the server. Now that we have that response, we can mock, we have something we can mock. And we can basically say, hey, mock web server in queue. And what we're going to do is do a new mock response. So we do a new mock response. And we can set the body. So this is going to be that JSON response that we just created. And then we can go ahead and add a header if we want to. So we can say the header name is content type. And the value is going to be application/JSON. And that is our mock web server. So that's going to send that response back. So now what we can do is we can say, go back to our step verifier. So this should look pretty familiar. Step verifier.create. We're going to use that post client.find all. And what we'll do with that is expect next. And we are going to do the same thing. So we expect the next to be hello. We expect the next to be goodbye. We expect us to verify that that is complete, right? And then we can even do a couple other things with the mock web server. We can say mock web server.take request. And what this will return back to us is a recorded request. And from that, we can say assertions.assert equals. We can say that we expect the call to be a get call. So recorded request.get method. And then we can say we assertions.assert equals. And again, we should turn that into a static import. So the next assert equals, we want to make sure like the URI is correct. So we make sure we're calling something like /posts, and we can get that from the recorded requests, get path. And you'll see there's a bunch of other ones in there that you can use to check different attributes if you want. Let's add an exception for that. Okay, so now instead of mocking all the different parts of the web client, we're mocking that response back, which seems a little bit more fluent or a little bit more like a unit test, right? We're not having to like put all these pieces of the puzzle together. We're just doing what we do. We don't want to make it an actual call to the service, but we want to make sure our code is doing the right thing and that we're just mocking out that response that comes back. So let's go ahead and run this and see if this works. And it does. Cool. Okay, so I'll take a look at one more, and then maybe I'll just go ahead and post the fourth one that we can take a look at real quick. So this one's going to be a true integration test. Whoops, wrong. Let's go down here. Java, we can say post client int test. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use the @Spring Boot test annotation, and we're going to use that to set up a web environment on a random port. So we'll say random port, and now we're starting up a server on a random port. We don't care where. Now, because Spring is involved, we can auto-wire some things in. One of those is the post client. So I'm going to say post client, and now I can say @test. I can say void should find all tests. And at this point, now I can just say post client.find all. What is going to give me, what is coming back for that? All the posts. Again, we can use the step verifier to create our posts. And then what I'm doing here now is expecting the next count. I'm not going to verify each one of them, but I do want to make sure 100 come back because I know that service returns 100. And then I want to verify that that is completed. So this, a little bit simpler. Again, we're doing an integration test. We're actually calling out to that JSON placeholder service, so we should get 100 back. Cool. So that works as well. One more I'm going to show you. And again, I think to save on some time here, we'll kind of paste some code and talk about it. But I'm going to set up a quick, everything that we've done so far, we've tested against the actual client, right? In more of a real-world application, I might have a controller here. So I might have something like a post controller. And this post controller might do a couple of things. It might bring in the post client. And it might have its own endpoint for finding all. So we can call this /posts on our application, and it will use the post client to reach out to that JSON placeholder service and get all the posts, right? So in this case, if I wanted to create a post controller integration test, I can. And I want to just show that off quickly. So if I say new Java class, post controller int test. And the reason I wanted to show this off is, again, we'll use that same random port just to start up a server. But now what I can do is I can go ahead and use something like the web test client. So if I come in here, look at the web test client, the name, client for testing web servers that uses web client internally to perform requests while also providing a Fluent API to verify the responses. This client can connect to any server over HTTP or a WebFlux application via mock request and response objects. So this is another test in my repertoire that I really enjoy using. So now we can use that web test client to basically make a call out to GET. Here I'm calling the URI posts. I am sending in these values. And then what I want to test is, hey, the length should be equal to 100. The expression, maybe I want to make sure the user ID, title, and body are all not empty, right? So we can go ahead and run this, and this is just another test that I continually go to. So again, there is a README in here with some more information about all of the things that we talked about today. I hope I was able to answer that question. Again, thank you for getting that question in. I really appreciate it, and I thought it was a good one. And I hope you learned something new today. I hope you found this video useful. And if you did, friends, you know what time it is. Please do me a favor, leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.